Someone at the table starts telling a childhood story, and suddenly the room fills with color. They remember the smell of rain on the porch, the exact tone of a parent's voice, the strange mix of embarrassment and joy in a single afternoon. People laugh, nod, add details like they are walking through an old house they still have keys to, and you are sitting there with something else entirely. You can supply the facts. You know which neighborhood you lived in, what school you attended, who was in your class, what year you moved. But when you try to step inside the memory, there is no felt sense of being there, no inner footage, no emotional texture, no you. It is not that you lack a past. It is that the past does not arrive as experience. It arrives as a file name without the file. So the real question is not why you are not nostalgic, but what it means when a mind can function in the present while a whole chapter of the self stays locked behind a white wall. That white wall has a name, even if most people have never heard it. It is less like ordinary forgetting and more like a break in autobiographical continuity. The thread that lets your life feel like one unfolding story rather than a set of disconnected records. Normal memory fading still leaves fragments with heat in them, a blurry scene, a scent, a flash of pride or fear that proves you once stood inside that moment. What we are talking about here is different. It feels like you reach back and the hand comes up empty, not because the details are fuzzy, but because the experience never shows up as something you can re-enter. From the outside, you may look completely functional. You can study, work, laugh at jokes, hold conversations, manage responsibilities, but inside, the past does not carry the usual signature of self-presence, that quiet certainty of, I was there. Instead, childhood becomes a timeline of data points, addresses and names and dates, while the living texture of it stays missing, as if the system saved the metadata but not the movie. And sometimes, when you try to reach past the metadata, your body reacts as if you have touched a live wire. It might happen in a quiet moment, staring at an old photo, hearing someone say, "Remember when you were little?" or walking past a street that should feel familiar. You decide to push a little harder. You try to locate one birthday, one car ride, one afternoon in a bedroom that you know existed. Then the drop happens. Not a gentle blur, but a sudden emptiness, like stepping off a ledge in the dark. Your chest tightens. Your breath turns shallow. Your throat feels dry. Some people describe a faint nausea or a buzzing in the limbs, as if the nervous system is bracing for impact. The strange part is that the mind may still offer nothing concrete. There is no clear image, no single scene to explain the alarm. Yet the alarm is real. It is panic at a low volume, more like an internal pressure than a dramatic episode. The experience can feel like trying to access a hard drive that has been wiped, except the device is not silent. It flashes a warning: do not open this folder. When other people notice this gap, they often misread it in a way that sounds flattering but misses the point. They might say you are not sentimental, that you live in the present, that you must be resilient because you are not weighed down by the past. Some even treat it like a gift, as if you were handed a clean slate. But a clean slate is effortless. This is not. The absence has edges. It has rules. It is less like blank paper and more like a document with whole paragraphs blacked out, a story edited for public release. It can feel like a library whose oldest wing is flooded on purpose, not because the books did not matter, but because letting people roam the aisles would have been dangerous. That difference matters, because it changes the moral of the story. This is not about someone who simply refuses nostalgia. It is about a system that learned to restrict access, and then kept restricting it long after the emergency passed. And that restriction is not passive. It costs something to maintain a sealed room in your own timeline. If the brain has decided a certain corridor leads to overload, the nervous system does not just forget and move on. It stands guard. It keeps the gate closed with small, continuous adjustments that you may not notice until you look at your baseline and realize how rarely you are truly at rest. This is why people can feel tired in a way sleep does not fix. The body may lie down, but the internal security system keeps scanning. There can be a constant low tension in the shoulders or jaw, a sensitivity to tone, a subtle readiness to react. Not because you are dramatic, not because you are weak, but because some part of you is busy preventing contact with what feels unsafe. You are spending energy to not know. And when you live that way for years, fatigue becomes less an event and more a background atmosphere. When autobiographical continuity is thin, the present becomes a construction site. Other people lean on an inner narrative that quietly tells them who they have been, what they survived, what they loved, what they learned. Without that felt storyline, you end up building yourself in real time, moment by moment, as if your identity has to be assembled on the spot. This often produces a specific talent set. You track people with incredible accuracy. You read microshifts in mood, timing, and tone. You anticipate what is coming before it is said. Hypervigilance can look like social intelligence, and sometimes it is, but it can also be a compensatory strategy for not having a stable sense of your own internal history. You can describe other people clearly while staying strangely undefined to yourself, as if self-knowledge requires a kind of emotional memory you were never allowed to keep. That same nervous system pattern can make you excellent in crisis. When something breaks, when emotions spike, when the room turns chaotic, you may become unusually calm and effective because your body recognizes threat as familiar terrain. You can problem solve, organize, contain, and perform. The problem is what happens when nothing is happening. Quiet can feel like an empty hallway with too much echo. Stillness can bring a low, uneasy pressure, a sense of blankness that does not feel peaceful. It feels exposed. So you reach for noise, work, scrolling, caretaking, anything that keeps the internal spotlight from landing on the white wall. You are not addicted to drama. You are avoiding the strange discomfort of safety, because safety asks the nervous system to power down, and yours may not fully trust that it is allowed to. In relationships, this can create a role that looks generous but carries a hidden cost. You become the listener, the steady partner, the person who holds space and asks the right questions. You do not demand much, partly because needing things can feel risky, and partly because you are practiced at being the adaptable one. But when intimacy requires deep self-disclosure, the system can freeze, words flatten, emotion goes distant. It can feel like speaking through glass, present enough to respond, not present enough to be reached. The other person may interpret it as disinterest or coldness, even though what is happening is protective. Your mind is keeping certain doors closed to preserve stability. Over time, the gap reaches forward as well as backward. If the past arrives as data without feeling, the future can become hard to picture in a vivid, personal way. You may choose paths that are logical and safe, not because you lack ambition, but because desire is difficult to locate when your emotional map has missing landmarks. Even joy can be muted, not absent, but compressed, as if the volume knob is turned down across the entire range. The highs do not soar and the lows do not fully collapse, which can look like strength from the outside. Inside, it can feel like functioning without inhabiting, like living efficiently but thinly, getting through life instead of actually being in it. One way to understand this, in plain neuropsych terms, is to look at how the brain normally turns experience into a personal story. The hippocampus helps organize events in time, binding sights, sounds, and emotions into a sequence that can be revisited. It is part of what gives you that subtle internal stamp of ownership. This happened to me, in this order, and I can step back into it. Under chronic stress, especially when a child feels repeatedly unsafe or unsupported, that system can go partially offline, not because the brain stops recording, but because it stops packaging what it records into a coherent, accessible narrative. The result is not a lack of information, it is a lack of storyline. Meanwhile, the alarm system, often associated with the amygdala and related circuits, can keep a different kind of record. Implicit memory does not show up as a clear picture. It shows up as body knowledge, a sudden heart rate spike when someone raises their voice, a tightening in the stomach around a certain smell, a reflex to scan exits, to read faces, to anticipate conflict. You might not remember the kitchen from back then, but your body still reacts to the emotional weather that once lived there. No inner footage, but a soundtrack that plays in the background. From this angle, the white wall starts to look less like a defect and more like a firewall. Dissociation can function as a boundary that separates overwhelming material into a mental zone marked "not me." For a child, that separation can be life-saving. If the people you depend on are also the source of fear, You cannot afford to fully process what is happening and still stay attached enough to survive day to day. So the brain chooses function over integration. It keeps you moving, and it stores the rest in a form that does not require conscious access. If that framing is true, then the gap is not a personality flaw, and it is not evidence that you are broken at remembering. It is evidence that you adapted. You did not forget because you were weak. You stopped accessing because access was expensive. At some point, your system made a trade. Memory for function. It chose to keep you in school, keep you socially coherent, keep you able to attach to people you might have needed, even if the cost was losing the felt continuity of your own story. In that sense, the white wall is not emptiness. It is an achievement, a survival technology built out of necessity. The problem is that survival mechanisms do not automatically retire when danger ends. What saved the child can imprison the adult. You can look successful, dependable, even unshakable, and still feel like you are living at a distance from yourself. The protection keeps running, and the result is a life that is very good at not falling apart, but not always good at being fully lived. So what do you do with a system like that? Not force it, not argue it into opening. You cannot will your way through a neural safety response. If the gate was built to prevent overwhelm, pressure only tells the brain it was right to lock it. The nervous system loosens its grip only when it senses enough safety, consistently, over time. That is why the goal is not necessarily to recover every childhood detail, like a detective reconstructing a case. The goal is to increase your capacity for presence now, because presence is what makes integration possible. Safety can start in the body, regular sleep rhythms when you can, gentle movement that signals to the brain that the world is not an emergency, breathing that lengthens the exhale and teaches the alarm system a different baseline. Safety can also be relational. One person, one room, one routine where you do not have to perform or manage anyone else. And there is a third layer that is often overlooked: language. Naming the gap without shaming it. Saying, "This blankness is not nothing. It is a trace." In a strange way, the emptiness is a form of memory, evidence that something once had to be held outside awareness. If reaching back triggers intense panic or disrupts daily life, it can help to work with a trained professional. The point is not to break the door down, it is to stand near it without bracing. And maybe that is the closing image to keep. Not you storming the sealed room, not you demanding proof from a mind that learned to survive, just you placing a hand on the welded door and noticing what happens in your body when you do. The door exists for a reason. It is not your enemy. It is a record of what your system judged to be too much, too soon, too alone. So instead of forcing it open, you practice a different question. What would change if I stopped gripping the handle so tightly? What would happen if I let safety be ordinary? If you have lived with a white wall, you do not need to convince anyone that your past matters. You only need enough gentleness to let your present become real. And from there, whatever returns can return in the only way it ever should, at the pace of safety.